Hello, my beautiful people. I hope that you are well today as we are about to experience such a gem. I am so happy to welcome into this space Suzanne Kingsbury, which is a dear friend that our life are woven together for such a long and precious time around books and reading and writing. Suzanne is, wow, we prepared the really official title, but my heart wants to say is that Suzanne is a healer of writers and a healer, a medicine woman of words, stories, and transmissions. This is the non-official title. The official title is that she is the head and the heart of a worldwide literature art that is named the Gateless. And I've been part of it for a short period of time. And I feel that this is such a beautiful and important conversations for us to be in. Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you, Homaya. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be able to talk to your folks.
Yes. Would you take a moment to share with us about the Gateless Method and the Gateless, we can say, Institute?
Yes, the Gateless Method was born because I was writing in an academic situation. So I was getting my master's degree at a sort of prestigious US academic institution. And I began to notice that most of what the work was centered on was criticism. So you'd write something and then you'd go into this room, and usually an old white guy at the helm of the table would tell you what was wrong with your work. And then everybody around the table would tell you what was wrong, what you needed to fix, why it wasn't working. And then they would say some nice things too. But what would happen is people would leave the room crying, or they would quit the program, or they would get writer's block. All these sort of bad things were happening with the work and with these very incredibly brilliant creative writers. And I had been writing all my life, had never had writer's block, loved writing. It was a savior to me in a childhood that was full of abuse and full of trials and tribulations. And to see it, I would say, bastardized in this way and abused it was heartbreaking. And I began to look at whether we actually create well when we're being criticized. What is happening in the brain when you get criticized, especially for something that feels vulnerable? And what happens is we go into fight or flight, of course, which is the highest place that we can go in terms of being stressed. And we cannot reach into long-term memory. We can't reach into the imagination. We can't reach into our innovative, creative muscles up in the brain. We can't do any of that when we're being criticized, even a little bit. So the creative brain science is really saying that this is not working, and yet we're still doing it. So what I began to do was to work with writers differently and show them the power that they have inside their work and what's really brilliant about the work. And then I would pass craft tools or publishing resources so that they could move the work out into the world. And what I found was when I was researching the brain science, because I'm still researching it, it's fascinating to me. Creative neuroscience is a field that's very little known, and there's so much information there. But they had also done this very interesting study, Homaya, where they compared Zen monks in the state of samadhi, deep state of meditation, and creative writers who had reached mastery, or creative musicians or creative dancers, what was going on in the brain. And it's exactly the same. So unless we can relax and be radically nurtured as writers, as creatives, really, we cannot reach that genius that we all have inside. So that's really the foundation of what you experience when you're inside the academy, but the Gateless Academy, but it's also what we're spreading out into the world as writers. And it's just had an incredible impact on the literary world and on the world in general, in terms of the books that are coming out of Gateless and the people and the essays. And yeah, it's an amazing to watch.
Yeah. Yes, I can feel how the criticism and self-judgment is such a pillar in society that in some way we can understand why it is so challenging to build and create, and why we see so much more of the same, while we are each very individual, unique being with a very unique message.
That's exactly right. That's exactly it. It's like we're singular in what we have to offer. So how can somebody else criticize our story and how we're telling it?
Yeah.
You might want craft. You might want to know, how do I do dialogue? Or how do I start this so the reader really gets into it? Or what's the best way to end it? And that's all craft, and that's fun. It's, oh, you could do this or that. There's a million ways a writer can go with the story. But to break it down, to instruct it, to tell them that they're doing it wrong is just, it is, what it's doing is it's silencing us. And it's silencing these really big stories that want to walk into the world and create alchemy everywhere. Yeah. So we are, in effect, when we get criticized for the work, we're being silenced, our voice is being cut off. And it's just really hurting society in a big way.
Yeah. Hurting society, hurting us. Yeah. There's also like a deconstruction that we need to do as individuals to accept the gateless presence, to accept, indeed, to open, to believe in it, to trust in it, that the world and the message are pure and they are authentic indeed, and they are being empowered by the divine, and really to follow that. There is also a deconstruction of the disbelief in order to live and to follow the truth.
That is so true, because we're conditioned to believe that without criticism, we can't get better.
Yeah, we're conditioned to believe that we're wrong.
That we're wrong, that we need to be fixed, that our story isn't strong enough, that who are we to tell it? All of these have been given to us since time immemorial, especially as women, as people who identify as women, or people who are anywhere outside of that very white male patriarchal construct that does have a voice and is able to be heard. If you're outside of that at all, anywhere, there's a good chance that you'll get judged and criticized because you haven't assimilated to that quote unquote norm. So in order to teach ourselves that we can trust this, we can trust the fact that we do have power inside our own story, that we do have brilliance, that we do have innate talent, that we have craft that's already there, that we've known since we were born, how to tell or write a story. It is so hard to trust that, because all our life we've been given these messages not to trust it. So how do you turn around and then trust it? Who can help you get to that place of, okay, I believe in this and I'm going to go for it? And the who is you, is your soma. So when you get criticized, you can feel the somatic really curl up. It just wants to get small and into a little ball. And when you're doing gateless, when somebody's showing you where your power is inside your story and what's working, you can feel the soma open. The body opens. It feels very light. You feel excited. You want to get back to the page. And to be able to begin to trust that is to be able to begin to trust yourself as a powerful creative in the world.
I do remember the compound effect that is happening, because when you write, there are waves, right? So sometimes you write and it's really pacific, and then suddenly there's this purge of energy jumping on you. Somewhere God is vomiting light upon you, right? And then the words and the composition and everything is like shimmering light. And you're like, and people are looking at it and can really tell you, hey, here it's really potent. Here it's visible. Here it is notable. Here we feel you. And then you start practicing. I felt that I started practicing more and more, arriving to those states where what I said and what I write feels full.
That's exactly it. It's funny because when people come to retreat, Gateless Retreat, where we radically nurture them, and they have a private chef, they're getting Thai head massage and Reiki every day. They're getting prompts that lead them into the theta beta brain state. It's very relaxing. And they will write from that space. Then we have these writing sessions right afterwards, and the sound healing, the breath work, all of it. And what happens when they go back to their agent or their publisher is that they will pick out those parts that these writers wrote on Gateless Retreat and say, this is how we want you to write. So that's the writer's affirmation that when they go into this deeply relaxed state where they've been radically nurtured, that the work is on fire. It's on fire. It's not on fire when they're trying to think of the rules, when they're trying to think of what's wrong with this. How could I do this so everybody loves me and everybody loves it? And how, so it's very fascinating to begin to get affirmations for that place that you're talking about where exactly God comes in. The divine is a force field that's actually working through you and with you as you write.
Yeah. Amazing. Suzanne, when you are witnessing the thousands of writers that you had the privilege to escort and witness as they are crafting their truth into words, what have you witnessed regarding the inner transformation that they needed to go through? Because most of the writers are very introspective, they are very introverts, and there are people who are in love with words and descriptions that someone will say, I don't know, a glass, and a writer will write 5 sentences instead of a glass. So those people, very similar to many people who are spiritual, connected, empathic, intuitive. This is the common people, right, that also find themselves writing. There is an inner process to go, an inner process where you are willing to face your truth and you are willing to express the truth, willing to express the truth as your truth, in your signature. What do you see the process?
That's right. You're right. And it's this experience of moving inside and then with that inner landscape, meeting the landscape of a blank page. And the blank page is like a sanctuary, right? You can put anything there. There's no judgment in the blank page. It just wants to hold you and hear you and hold your stories. And when someone moves to the blank page with the impetus or the inspire to write the story, they're having a relationship with that blank page as a friend. They're also having a relationship with the word. And then the spirit of the word is also moving through them, which we've talked about this before. But essentially, when the word came to us, it came to humanity, it was considered divine. The sounds were considered the word of God, right? So it's the sounds, the letters themselves. So it is a relationship with a kind of divinity. So when people stay in the prayer of writing for a long period of time, or they come away and retreat with it, or they meditate in that way every day with it, or whatever their relationship is with it, they begin to feel that what is not needed in their lives begins to drop away, because it is a kind of medicine. You are allowing it to drop into the body, to move through the hands, to come out on the page. The story is alchemized in that way. So, for example, if you have a story of trauma, And you're walking around with that story. And all your life, the story is a ghost that follows you and maybe interrupts some of the things you want to do in your life. And then you suddenly decide to sit down and write it. And nobody is going to judge you for this. And nobody is going to criticize you for it. And you can tell yourself even nobody's going to see it. And you write down the story of trauma. And suddenly that is out of the body and onto the page in front of you. And not only that, but you have tremendous agency over it. You can crumple it up and throw it out. You can move it around. You can start again. You can take a piece of the story and bring it out and really look at it and just focus on that detail. You can write the story from another perspective. So what trauma does is it takes away our agency. What happens? It happens usually very suddenly. We have no control over it. We feel victimized by it. We feel passive in that experience. And then we turn around and write that story. And suddenly we are the God of that story. We have a spirit coming through us that's helping us revisit the former self, wrap it around in a cozy way with words. And then you can fiddle with it. That's art. That's what's so beautiful about it. So how do people change? They literally untraumatize themselves, writers. And when you're on retreat or in the academy, for example, you're writing the story onto the page and then you're reading it aloud and giving it to the circle. And because it's so sacred and Gateless to have written a story, Gateless takes it and tells you where the power is in that story. And suddenly you're no longer feeling that you're a victim of what happened, but you're feeling that you have made art of what happened, that you have shown through this art how powerful you really are, how brilliant you are, that you have innate talent, that you have craft that's coming out your pores. You didn't even realize it. Gateless writers, their lives are changing because of the process and because they're freed up then to have other stories rise that don't have to be the ones that were following them around as traumatic ghosts.
Yeah, this is a beautiful part of to know that there would be a moment in life, and this is part of the healing process, that what you considered as a shadow starts to be the healer and starts to be part of your light. Yet it is waiting for you to transform it into that light giver. This is what I get from like that echoes in such deep place inside of me as a healer, as a master healer, as a teacher, that the full healing is when you put aside this dead healer and you're able to really compose everything again, not only as you compose it before from a soul perspective, but again from a human perspective, which is like the biggest ownership and actually an act of mastery.
That's right. And if you look at the word react, it has within it the word create. So when we react, not in the sense of a response, but react through the work, through the art, then that is how we create something new with the energy of that traumatic experience or of any story at all. We reacted on the page so that we can create something that's really new for us. And that's why we're here, is to just create anew, to recycle energy in some ways into something really powerful and really brilliant that isn't ostracizing us, but it's working for us in a way.
Yeah, re-act. Such a wow. A beautiful way to look at it. Now, another thing that came up for me when you were speaking is this dynamic that we have where we keep everyone in mind when we are of service, when we are creating our art. We keep so many in mind while it is our art. It is for us. And I feel that this process of becoming visible, which is a fear of criticism, right? The fear of becoming visible is the fear of criticism. That you, as you are with your truth, with your story, with your history, with your vision, you're inadequate to be in society, right?
Yes.
And I hear you in the process that you're speaking about how much this is your art, this is your sacred art, and it's not actually your business what others will do with it.
That's right. And if there's one, there's two. And if there's two, there's many. So when I have a story, and the energy of that story is held here and within my body, and I don't move it onto the page, even if I have an urge to do it, and I don't share it because I'm afraid, then the other person who went through the same thing also doesn't see, oh, I'm not alone. There are other people who have been through this as well. And she made it through, and I can too. Because what this culture has done in the cult of criticism is to make us feel isolated and alone in our experiences. And when you feel isolated and alone in your experience, and you cannot connect and you cannot create community, then you don't get that communal strength that we feel so much when we're in a collective. Like what you've done with your work is create this big collective of people who are ascending, who are doing the work. And once that collective comes together, that force field of power is incredible. But if we feel lonely and alone and we're too scared to put out our story because we're afraid of getting criticized, that collective never starts, that chain reaction, those paper dolls that are holding hands. So it is that you are inside this experience on your own. And what you can remind yourself is that if one person sees this story and feels less alone, I've started a chain reaction of a big force field of connection that can change the world. So it is not about the numbers and the mass. It's about who's that one person that the story is going to reach. And once we begin to see the one rather than the many, that's when that intimacy begins. And then there is a collective of really intimate people who are sharing stories.
The word intimacy here really creates a radical change in the perspective of becoming visible and sharing my truth and feeling confident to share my truth, both in emitting and receiving the response. And the word intimacy, like if you're able to come in intimacy, so the response will have the same frequency of intimacy. But if you're coming in your visibility in order to impress, in order to control, in order to convince, like even just saying this space between us, it has such a cold frequency. Then, of course, the conversation will go into judgment and competition. But if your voice, the voice that you're sharing, the voice that you choose to write your words, to even, like it's really important for me, this, let's say, my affair with the written word is endless. I have so many around me just now, so many notebooks, day and night, already from a young age. And there would be no day that I would not write. It does not exist. And it took me this process of writing and even writing posts, writing teacher's manual, writing emails. You write all day long, you always express. Way of writing to connect. This is this word of intimacy that you're using that really create a connection.
Yeah, we really are writing for one person, and knowing that one person represents many people. So this idea that we're writing to an amorphous they or them, the herd, the crowd has not been kind in our culture. This idea that I'm trying to please a crowd and I alone am going to be able to do that is very intimidating. We connect person to person like you and I are doing now. And so you want to think of that when you approach the page, just one person that you're almost whispering the story to in all its detail, in all your vulnerability. And that is how the reader experiences it then. oh, this is just for me. This is reaching my heart. She's talking to me. And just like you're saying, it's not about impressing anyone. It is about connecting with them and saying, I am here. This is my story. And there's nothing more powerful than that, Homaya, I don't think. It is the way that we find each other is through these stories that we have. And we've become so good at storytelling. That's what's exciting about this new age, is that we have an ability to find the connection through all these interfaces. And as addictive as they become and all of that stuff, there is a foundational blessing of the fact that I met you, you're in Portugal, I'm in Connecticut, and we can have this depth of connection between the two of us
through time and space.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. There was something else that you were talking about that, oh, I remember. There's a little story that's interesting. So after my first book got published, and it published with a very big house in New York and very famous agent, and it went out and it got movie options, did a lot of things, got translation, and my life had taken on this new, almost a celebrity feel. I was on this very big tour and I was showing up on all these publications and everything, but I felt extremely lonely and I felt very separated from the work. And then one day I remember I had come home. I was very tired from all of it. And I got an email, and it was a woman in England. And she said, my best friend was in the psychiatric hospital because she tried to kill herself. And she keeps wanting to kill herself. And so they can't let her go home. But she loves your book. And I brought it to her in the hospital so she could remember what love is and what play is, and that there is love in the world. And she read it and she remembered, and now she can go home. And after I read that email, I remember sitting there and thinking, that is the person that I wrote the book for. I no longer felt lonely. I no longer felt isolated. I no longer felt, why am I even doing this? What has my life become? I didn't really ask for this. I don't know where I'm going. I felt, oh my God, this is what writing can do. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be the movie and all that. It just needs that you connect with one person, and your story could save their life. That's what we want to remember about sharing our stories.
Yeah, so beautiful. I feel so much gratitude to hear this. This sacred messenger, everyone, you, the friend, the one who have transformed her life through the reading, everything. Yet I also feel that in the world that we're living currently, where you have in the palm of your hand, you have the entire world almost, you feel. And you can see people like with millions and millions of eyes on them. In the past, those were the kings. And then afterwards, there were those artists who stood on the stage, the different artists in different times. Like even if we go to Greek, and like afterwards, like the creation of the theater, and then the creation of music and the music industry. And then now it is so tangible, and what was before a dream is a silent nightmare. And there are so many people, maybe they are not shutting down their voice because of an illusionary criticism that they project before the act of expressing their truth, but they shut their voice because it's not good enough. And it will never reach, like, the difference between, I want to reach the person in my heart, even if I would never know. You were lucky. But there could be that I feel that many times that I write an email, I don't know who's reading it. And I don't know who's being transformed by it. I write a post. I can see there are thousands of people reading this post. I know maybe 20, maybe 25. Maybe 30, I know. There are others who keeps on watching and keeps on reading, and I don't know anything about them.
That's right.
So there is also a gap in consciousness.
Yes, that's right. And at the end of retreat, we always stand in a circle and we give the retreat up. We give all the stories up, all the goodness, all the feeling of radical nurturing, all the private chef, the body work we got, we give it up, and we let it go out through the roof, out over the world, to come into the lap of a woman who cannot be there, or a person who cannot be in that room telling her story. She's under a tarp, maybe in Pakistan or India or LA, and she has that story and that beauty and that power and that creative urge within her, and she has been stymied and silenced. So when we think, oh, I'm being selfish, I'm going to retreat, or I'm going to work with Homaya, whatever we're doing for ourselves, you are not just doing it for yourself. We have to start doing these things if we can, so that we can spread the light energetically. Writing is a massive shift for the self. Telling that story, getting agency over the trauma, massive shift. But when you shift, we are not alone. We're all one. You shift, and then another woman shifts. It's the butterfly effect. Somewhere, some other country, some other city, some other situation. So this idea that who am I? If you have the chance, the hour, the 20 minutes, do it. Do it. If you can do it, then that means you're supposed to do it. If you have the dream, go for it. There's no way you could have the dream without also being able to make it happen. And I think the issue is that we have been told for so long, you can't, you're not enough, you're not good enough. Like we're not birthed out of the womb with these ideas. They're filled inside our heads since the time we're tiny. So those aren't you. Those are just voices that you've heard and accumulated all your life. They're external, in fact, but they've gotten internalized because it's scary. It's really scary. It's like, how do I survive here in this sort of wilderness of humanity? And now we're adults and we can make those decisions. And that's what's so exciting. And the more you get yourself out there, the more you're going to find those other women, those other people that want to connect with you too. And so it begins to create this community that you didn't even know was out there. And you can feel so much less alone when that starts to happen.
It's so powerful. My own experience many times, especially with channeling and any transmission, is that there's somehow inside of you, the balance inside of me, the balance between inhaling the people, those that I feel, those are in my presence, those are who ask the question, and exhaling divinity. This is my responsibility as a teacher, as a space holder, as a writer. This is my responsibility to find the right balance between inhaling what exists and exhaling upon that this divine light that comes through words, and give it enough power to transform whatever came in. And that is in the microcosmos of me being a teacher in a class, but it's also in the macrocosmos of me delivering a message, an idea, a concept. Again, writing a book or writing a post or writing an email or giving an answer to a student.
Yeah, the back. And what you're talking about, what I think is so beautiful about what you're saying is that it's everywhere in nature. Nowhere in nature do you see an imbalance in that, right? So the tide comes in, the tide goes out. The breath comes in, breath goes out. The tree receives the sun and the rain, the tree gives fruit or flower. Like it's just always there, that balance. And then somewhere we were stopped up. No, you have to hold this inside. And we're bursting. We're bursting with it. And when it has to stay inside, that's when the dis-ease begins and we're not able. So there's something very healing about moving it out, even if it's only moving it out in a post or in a journal. There's something incredibly healing for the body about, okay, now I'm moving this out. I had it come in and now I'm moving it out.
Journaling saved my life.
It's
Sometimes I had a student not so long ago. She was asking me, like, how can I find the right words when someone is speaking? You practice journaling. You practice a relationship with the word. You practice a relationship with your expression, with your self-expression. That when a question is coming from your client, from your husband, from you are familiar both with the emotion and with the words and with the way to articulate it in a way that it will land. Because to touch this one person, it's not only about finding the words, it's like really being able to articulate it in a way that it lands.
That's right. Yeah. And journaling is really a way to understand the self and what's inside there. And once we know what the rich rooms in the self hold through the journaling, it's much easier to be articulate because we're clear who we are and what's in there. And when we're not that clear, that's when things get a little bit muddy. But journaling is such an incredible tool for self-clarity and self-love and self-relationship and relationship with something bigger than the self, and the surprising nature of journaling that we don't have to think, right? That we're just in this rote kind of relationship with the self, on board with the self. You journal and you're surprised by what comes. You're surprised by who you are and what you have to say and think and do. And that's how a lot of channeling begins, right? Is journaling. Yeah.
So beautiful. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, I love being with you, Homaya, because you have just such an incredible light about you, and you're in that light and moving from that light. And so it's just always such deep transmission, even as we're just talking on the surface level. This other healing's going on that I can feel while I'm talking to you. Yeah. Oh my God, I'm getting this incredible transmission, and I'm sure everyone listening is getting it too. They're just driving in their car wherever they are, just feeling like, oh, I feel it.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel that this is so important for spiritual people. Like, really, I do feel that we are in an era where light is so needed, and light work and light activation and light generation. It's like all of that is so needed. I highly believe that the future is waiting for those light leaders, those spiritual leaders. Like that, it's done. We cannot hide anymore. And part of the practices is learn how to show up and learn how to express and learn how to deliver and learn how to deliver in a way that it will land.
I agree. And the more we write, the more we can fiddle with that landing. Where is the power of this sentence that I just wrote, or this paragraph? What is standing out? What do I mean by this? And really playing with the work, not being afraid to, after it rushes out, to play around with it. What is here? And that's how the articulation starts to happen in a really beautiful way.
There's another thing that I feel I want to share. Do you know this story that you just shared, this beautiful story about the woman that was completely healed and transformed? I feel that it is beautiful, and it is like a dream coming through. And also, I feel it is really important that we don't wait for this 100% impact, because she is a return light that showed you 100% impact, but also gave the recognition of those who were impacted 1%, 2%, 3%, not to underestimate that. Because when I'm calling and we are calling those spiritual leaders, those light leaders to show up and speak and bring their light, bring their medicine, they cannot wait for the 100%.
That's it. Yeah. And if you look back historically, they didn't wait. They didn't wait.
Wait.
They spoke. And we now look back and think, oh, Joan of Arc or Jesus or whoever the people are. But at the time, they didn't wait for people to understand.
It had to come, this little piece. Oh, thank you. I love you.
I love you, sweetheart. So great to be with you always.
Thank you.
Such a sister. Such a sister. I hope you have a beautiful day, and we will connect again. I know we will. We always do.
Thank you.
All right, sweetie. Soon.